Hello, welcome to the FPMW story. In this session, we are looking at classes and static method in OOP. This is part 3 of our videos. Yeah, so we are starting class method and static method. It's important we know these things by definition before even going to practice. So we are looking at class methods. So what are these class methods? For the information, the examples that we looked at to part 2 of this session, we defined certain methods that were having self in their parentheses. You remember this part. So this method were having self every time we had to define them. They were having self. So get name, they are having a keyword in there called self. This type of method, by definition, they are called instance methods. Instance methods. Now, today we are shifting from instance method to class method. These are just various ways of programming and they perform a special function in programming. Simply, a class method is just like any other method, but it has special declaration around its on top of the definition of that particular method. So it has an annotation or a decorator called a class method. So each and every time we are declaring a function or a method, we have to annotate this on top of that specific method we are claiming to be a class method. So that is def get name is equal to CLC, then name. Yeah, we explain, then we implement the details of this particular class. All I'm saying in short, whenever we are trying to define a class method to be called a class method, it has to have annotation on top of its definition. I hope you get that. Then we should always implement this. This is just, it's not a standard keyword or variable, but it has been adopted in community developers of Python. So we always use this CLC to indicate that this is a keyword that will be manipulating whatever variables or representing whatever variables that we put after it. That is class method definition. All right. So after doing so, let me give a brief definition, then we will give examples in programming. Okay. So a class method is actually the creator which is used in Python to create a method that is bound to class itself. Right? An instance method we defined it. An instance method we defined it by having a self parameter which is talking about, which is pointing to the class that it's being defined from. So we created the customer class. So whenever we define a method, we have to put an instance method indicating that that method belongs to the class, which means an object knows about itself. Having an object knowing about itself, that means it's going to know whatever method it contains. Now, to fulfill such kind of operation, that's how we end up putting self to every instance variable. Yeah. Now, in class method, we are saying it's used to bound to class itself rather than to any specific instance. That means a class method is used to bound itself to a class itself, not in the instance method. Basically, there are two main uses of class method. The first one is it is to build alternative constructor, commonly known as factory design approach, right? Yeah. So is to come up with an alternative constructor. This one being, we in another in the first or second video we defined the constructor by always defining it in this way. That's how we say that this is a constructor. Now in every class now Boy, what's your Africa voice is what? Now, in every class, we were defining this uh, keyword initiate with two underscores from the start and two underscores to its end. And we defined it that this is a constructor. So now a class method provides an alternative constructor because we are saying that we say that each time we define an object, each time we call an object from a class, we have to pass a constructor directly. And I appreciate you remember that part where we said we define the book one is equal to book, and then we pass the variables, any variables that were in the constructor, name and other. That's what we used to do. So now, what if I don't want to obtain this kind of variables? So a class method, this one, a class method is there to provide an alternative way of providing a constructor during the creation of an object. So I may have a book, one is equal to book, which is a class. Then this one, a class method act as a constructor. That means I would put whatever I defined in this. So since this is a method, it may be called directly, and I'll provide its method name, like we said, get name. Then we put whatever we want to put in there based on its definition. Sure. Then the other usage. So the first usage of class method is to provide alternative constructor, and we'll surely give an example for what we're talking of in programming. And the second usage is to access or modify class wide state, is to access or modify class wide state. That's what we are defining to, right? Yeah. I've given an example of providing alternative constructor, which we will do it as an example in programming. But I have also said that access or modifying class wide state, right? Yeah. So now, how can we access or modify class wide state? Apart from introduction to class method, we also have class attribute. Attribute. These attributes were it's other name for variables, right? So we may have different variables. Every variable that we define inside an instance method or inside the constructor by putting self, by putting this, we used to do this, right? Inside an instance method. So this variable is referred to instance variable. Now, a variable that is defined outside a method or outside an instance method or outside its constructor, it is called class attribute. So method defined outside method. Outside method is called the class attribute. Hope you understand, and we'll give examples to this. All right. Now let's do an example of what we're talking of. Okay, we're going to create a bank account class that is performing a function of withdraw and deposit and calculating tax and percentage per month of every transaction. Yeah, okay. Now, before we go into details, this sound like it will have different method that will manipulate the account bank class. So I'll move from this part and give just a simple program which will illustrate the functions of class method and class attribute. All right. So I'll call this as product class. This product class will have a tax rate which is 0.05. This is the initial tax, and we are after having this tax, we define a method called initiate, which is basically a constructor having self pointing to its object name as well as price. So this product class is just having information about the name of that product and the price, also as well as tax. So I'll continue defining this variable. So my point is this tax, we are saying that a class attribute, it is an attribute that is defined outside the variable, outside the method. This is a method or any other method that we are going to define from here. Any other method that will come up with here. So anything that is outside the method is called a class attribute. So I'll simply comment it class attribute variable. So this class attribute can it can be shared. We are saying it's always shared to all product instances. Do you know what this means? Shared to all product instances. That means this tax can be shared to anything inside method or any other definition that will come up with. Right? Okay. Shall we continue doing this? So we have demonstrated the class attribute and we want to see its usage. Okay, sure. We declare this variable, this instance variable to name. This name is this one that will be passed outside when an object is created or when the constructor is called. Then price is equal to price. Okay. From there, or price is equal to price, or we can say this is a base price, which will be referred to this price. Okay. From there, we'll define a method called get total price. Right? Get total price. This method will be getting the total price from this side. So what this method is going to do, since it's trying to get the total price, first it has to calculate the tax rate for a given price. Yeah. So what this means is we're going to utilize this class attribute, as we are saying, it is shared to all product instances. So we can use this variable inside there. So self so self dot base price multiplied by, this is how we calculate tax, plus, so I want to multiply by the tax rate there. So for me to multiply it, I have to know the class it is working in, which is a product class dot tax rate. Okay, why have I used this? Is the access method, or this is a recommended syntax to access class attribute. We have to refer it to to have to refer it to a class that it is coming from. So it is coming from product.tax. Product, then I access the method, I access the attribute. Okay. From there, we can now create what, a class method. Class at 41. Yeah, from there we want to create a method that will change the state of this tax rate. And you know that the tax always increases. Tax always, it's never constant like this. And we can never create a program that is having a final value for the tax. That means we have to create a certain method that will be manipulating that. And this method is where we are coming in as a class method, because in the beginning of this video, we defined it that a class method is a method that can be used to access and modify all the instance method or wide access. Okay. So this method will be updating tax. This method will update tax. We are going to use this variable, as we said, which indicate that it's a class attribute it is working on. And we'll be receiving the new rate from outside. Tax rate is equal to new rate. Sure. From here, we move on to another class method that will have a factory constructor or an alternative constructor. So we will annotate it or decorate it as class method. Dictionary COSC data dict. So this method, what it will be doing, it will be an alternative constructor. Alternative constructor. So we are saying this class will be an alternative constructor that will be receiving the prices and the name. So we understand that we are having this constructor, but we want to create another constructor in case we don't want to call this one, which is already receiving the price and the name. So a good part of this constructor of class method, it will receive that the price and construct in form of a dictionary. Then this dictionary will be splitted to get the value for the price and for the name of that particular product. All right. So that is, it will retain these variable. So this is where the definition of a constructor comes in, which will receive the data object, this one. Okay. Then after it receives whatever it is receiving in there, it's going to extract the attribute name and to extract data dictionary get price. Right? As simple as that. That means, for just for illustration for you to understand this, it's like I've created a dictionary outside this program. This is just for an example. Outside this program, then this dictionary will be defined as name, we have the price, we have the name of that product. Then we'll also have price, then to receive the price of about 5,000. Okay, so this will be illustrated outside, but when we call this method from dictionary, it will receive this variable in there. After it received, it will remove, it will try to call the variable stored in the name, that is iPhone, and another variable stored in the price, that is 5,000, which is the price, right? Yeah. So this is just an example of how we are going to use this method. All right, having done that, let's now illustrate how we can call and use what the class attribute and the class method that we have defined, as well as this constructor, as we are saying an alternative constructor. We know the program for it to learn, we have to define the main method. Okay, so scenario one, we will create the same dictionary which we were talking of there. So the name it as item data. Okay, from there, then I'm going to create a reference variable pointing to an object which will be created. So it will be product one is equal to how I'm creating an object there. So we have discussed this as a class name of whatever I want to get. You remember that whenever we call a class name during the creation of an object, we had to pass what a constructor there each and every time. You remember from the previous example, we had to pass the constructor. So normally in there, I have to put the name and the price. Now we are not going to do this, but we are going to use a class method function, which is from dict, which acts as an alternative constructor, as we are saying. Then it will receive this variable. Okay, just as simple as that. Now let's practice to print what will be contained in that product. So product one, this variable, right? And we said this variable is the one that we can use to access anything inside this class. So since we have used this part, we have used an alternative constructor having a class method, then we want to access the name and the price of this variable. So we are just going to say product dot name. Then we print product dot name. We can use it also to print product price. So this variable product name and product price. So the name is this one, of which is going to get an iPhone, and the price it should return 5,000. Okay. Before we go to scenario B, this is scenario one, utilizing the class method which acts as an alternative constructor. Let's try to learn this program if we don't have any errors. Okay. Okay. It has given me iPhone and 500. In short, all we are trying to say is that this class method is acting as an alternative constructor. It is the same way we can use this part.